Hey Jim, if I could have the next slide. So just very briefly, before I hand over to Jim, I'm going to just tell you a little bit about OCG. Most of you, I think, will know us. But as you can see, a lot of what we do is about identity-driven security. We've been into identity management, identity and access management for a very long time, and of course, we've always affected security because what we do is at the heart of it, getting what you know about people and getting attributes and so on synchronized across systems and people in systems when they should and not when they shouldn't is all about helping security. But security has very much come to the fore, and the news of the last week reminds us yet again about that. So why would you use OCG? Well, we have a very long track record for this kind of thing. We've done literally now more than 1,000 implementations of ILM or FIM or MIM. Very close ties to Microsoft and Partner of the Year for many years. And we talk to the team regularly. And of course, we're talking about an on-premises system now, but we're all about cloud as well. We do planning and assessment services, you see some of them there, and of course deployment is the main part of our business, and today's topic all about FIM and MIM and so on. And of course we follow up with managed services. But today is not about an advert for OCG, that's just a quick reminder for you. I'll be back to talk to you at the end about a few extra things, but I'm going to hand over to Jim now, who's going to give you the main dish of the day. So thanks, and over to Jim.
All right, thanks, Hugh. Some of you know me. For those who don't, Jim Troyer. I'm a senior architect here with OCG. I've been with these guys going on 6 years now. I've been doing identity management for a long time. They asked me to put together a webinar on upgrading from ILM or FIM to MIM, and you know, what are some of the gotchas, what are some of the migration paths that we have, how does it tie in with Azure, what are the new things we're getting out of MIM, and then we're also going to, I'm going to turn it back over to Hugh toward the end. We're going to talk about, you know, if you're going to be doing upgrades, maybe it's a good time to look at extending some capabilities as well, and we've got a couple of thoughts on that for you. So this is our agenda for today. You know, ILM's coming end of life. I know I saw the poll and nobody said that that they were using ILM, but maybe we missed someone, and I did say I'd talk about it, so we'll go over that. The migration paths are nice because it can be similar depending on what version of FIM you're on, but ILM obviously, there's some huge differences between ILM and MIM. So I think without further ado, let's get on with it. So synchronizing enterprise identities. So anyone who's using identity management, right? Do we still need on-premise identity management with this whole cloud thing coming along in Azure? And the answer is yes. All right? Azure relies on us having a solid consistent on-premise Active Directory to synchronize our identities up to the cloud. If we don't manage, if our on-premise AD is messy, then our Azure AD is going to be messy, and nobody wants messy. So in the current, whether you're ILM, FIM, or MIM, right, you've got an HR system. In the ILM world, all you have is ILM, and then it connects to Active Directory, other applications, whatnot. When we got MIM, or FIM, sorry, we went to FIM, we got the self-service portal, right? Sync Engine stuck around, but it upgraded to 64-bit, and MIM, pretty much the same thing, right? We still have the same portal. We have some more features. We have some more capabilities within that self-service portal. But the Sync Engine, other than some performance improvements, which we'll talk about, and obviously going to 64-bit from 32-bit, it stayed pretty much the same. It's pretty rock solid. It's what all of us have worked with the entire time we've worked with the Microsoft stack on identity management. So for those of you that are still using ILM, if there are any out there, you're going to have to get off that stuff. We're going to give you a good list of reasons why here in a second, but that link below there would take you to this same page on Microsoft's Identity End of Life page, and you can see it's coming up pretty quick, right? July of this year, and that's if you're running, obviously the latest and greatest ILM, which was not just Feature Pack 1, but SP1 on FP1. All right, so ILM to MIM considerations. Obviously, in-place upgrade is not an option, right? Beginning with FIM 2010, the sync engine is 64-bit, and then all the technologies that it required, all of the minimum requirements were 64-bit. The 32-bit extensions and MAs would still work, but at a price, right? Performance, of course, and stability. What do we need to do then? Well, obviously we need to convert all our .NET extension code to x64, and then look for and use the 64-bit version of the third-party apps, right? ILM, MIM, FIM, right? All of our connectors, our management agents, we use clients to reach out to things. We don't put anything on target systems to send us data. So all those clients need to be upgraded as well. I was just looking over at the questions here, so we've got at least one using ILM, so good. I'm glad we still covered it. All right, so ILM or FIM migration path, right? So one option, and we're just going to step through what it might look like, right? So this would be a migration path. I'm going to go to an upgrade path here in just a minute, but side-by-side implementation, that's one of our preferred methods. It's probably the cleanest method you have of going from an older version to a newer version, especially if you don't want to take a lot of old bad history with you. Right, so in the case of ILM or even FIM, you've already got a sync engine built somewhere. You're talking to your Active Directory, your on-prem applications, you're reading from HR, right? This might even be a two-way. All right, you see my arrows. Some things I have bi-directional data flow. We very frequently do write things back to HR. Now, some things to consider are, do we have a convergent system, right? If I lost my databases, if I was to re-implement all of my connectors, my MAs, and run full imports and full syncs, would everything be back to what it's supposed to be? Ideally, that is the case, but most systems have at least an explicit disconnector or 20, and possibly some explicit connectors. And those matter, the explicit connectors, because there are certain rules that get ignored when you have manually joined something as opposed to letting it join through the join process. So if you're going to go this route, you need to have a well-documented history of what your explicit connectors and disconnectors are. Unfortunately, since you're doing a migration path, you still have a living system, and you can go in and you can find your disconnectors. You may even find, if it's something you haven't looked at in a long time, that you don't need them anymore, right? If you did your breadcrumbing, these explicit connectors shouldn't be necessary anymore. So get rid of them, let them join back up, do their thing. The explicit disconnectors, because they're a better way, right? Get rid of them if you can. So the second half of this would be setting up our future state, right? So MIM sync being the main one if all you're running is ILM sync, right? The portal is going to be nice for some things you might be doing over here if you're still using the group populator, for instance. The portal is leaps and bounds ahead of that in ease of use and capabilities. But you'll see I've set up everything so that the MIM sync is in a read and sync only, right? So you've still got ILM over here doing its thing every day, keeping everything all synchronized. You're going to spin up MIM sync with your upgraded extensions and provisioning code, whatever else it might be, and you're just going to be reading from HR, obviously, but your on-prem apps in your Active Directory and letting it synchronize and keep an eye on what it wants to export. And that's how you're going to know if you have a convergent system. You know, you may think you do, but you don't. And you may have to adjust some rules to make everything work the way you want to. But that's the great thing about a state-based system is every time we get a change, we'll synchronize it. And if what we had planned on exporting isn't necessary anymore, we'll drop it out of the hologram. We're just going to keep there what we need to. And there are several tools and scripts and other methods to go and look at what your pending exports might be, and those are very helpful when you're setting up something like this. So you don't have to step through a connector space item by item and see what's going on. You can see that everyone is getting their display name changed because something is not quite right. Okay. So this is definitely the preferred method. Now there is an upgrade path. You can upgrade your database to FIM 2010 R2. So if you're on ILM or FIM 2010, you have to get to at least R2. And then you can go to MIM. And later on in the presentation here, we'll talk about how to get to MIM SP1 and what steps you need to take for that. And so how would we accomplish that? Well, we're going to back up our current sync database because that's all we have. We're going to export our ILM encryption key, right? Remember, if we don't have our encryption key, we're going to lose things like all of our encrypted credentials that are in the connectors that we're using to connect out to our SRE systems, as well as if you're using PCNS, anything that's in transit, right? That happens to be in transit between ILM and Active Directory or any other targets. Those are encrypted with that same key, and so you'll lose those. Not the end of the world if you don't have it, but we're assuming you have a live running system and there is a key utility to do your export. So grab yourself a key. And you're going to take the database you restored or you backed up here, and you're going to restore it to a 64-bit SQL Server. Whatever SQL Server you're planning on using for FIM 2010 R2. And we need to change the name of the database because that is hard-coded into the installer and it wants FIM synchronization service. And so we'll do that. Then there's a little setting we have to change, right? When we move that database over, it's going to come over in the compatibility mode of whatever we took it off of. And we need to make sure it's set to at least 2005 or 90 or 2008, 100. Keep in mind that we're going to, from ILM or FIM 2010, so we may already have this for FIM. For 2010 R2, we can go up to SQL Server 2012, right? But we don't, we can't go any further than that. And so the same thing would apply. You'd set the SQL Server to the proper, the compatibility to the proper value. And we would install our 2010 R2 sync. Right? And when we do that, we're going to point the installer to our migrated database. It's going to ask for our encryption key, which hopefully we have. And then the installer is going to upgrade, and I put it in quotes, right? What it's going to do is add some schema. It's going to remove some stored procs, add some stored procs, and get the database ready for FIM sync. I'm sorry, I was looking over at the questions here. Let's see, Hugh, do we have, can people ask questions out loud? I don't mind questions being asked as we go along here. They don't have to type everything in.
Hi, sorry, I think we tend to keep things muted just to stop things getting out of hand. But,
all right, we'll do a question and answer at the end then. I've got Chris Lloyd is with us answering some questions out there too, so I'll keep peeking over at it.
If there's time at the end.
Yeah, we'll just go over them at the end. All right, fair enough. All right, so that's the ILM upgrade path. Then we have the FIM 2010 upgrade path, what I call jumping through the hoops. So, and this is our upgrade path to, I should have been a little more clear on the title there, upgrade path to MIM, right? So we're on 2010 R2 and we want to get to MIM SP1. So FIM must be at 2010 R2 SP1 build 3114 or later at a minimum, right? That is SP1. From there, we can upgrade to the MIM RTM 1935 from August of couple years ago. Then we can upgrade that to the 2195. Then we can apply SP1, which was 1302. And then we can apply the latest hotfix. Or you could go back to the side-by-side installation and not have to deal with all of this. I don't know if an installer is ever going to come out that will take you straight from 2010 SP1 to MIM SP1, but it doesn't exist right now. The installs are like hotfixes in FIM, so if you've dealt with that, actually they're like hotfixes in ILM too, but there is more involved with the portal being, the service being in play. So remember, you have certain things you have to make sure of before you run these installers, or you're going to start patching the service and watch it chug along for a while and then roll everything back on you. Right? So Sync Engine's pretty safe. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen a Sync Engine upgrade go bad, which means the next one I do will go horribly wrong. But the service upgrade, you know, you want to make sure on your SharePoint install that you're a site collection admin, and you want to make sure that whoever you're doing the upgrades with, the user that you're using, is sysadmin on your SQL instance. Right? It needs to be able to do some sysadmin level jobs in there, right? Work with stored procs, schedule tasks, things like that. And of course, there's reboots with all of these, right? All right, so that's our upgrade paths, right? We can get from ILM to MIM 2016 SP1. We can get from FIM 2010 or 2010 R2 up there. But why do we want to do that? What's the point? So that's what we'll go into next year. We're going to talk about some features that we have with MIM 2016 and how we can leverage some of those, right? We have a few key things like self-service password reset. We didn't have that in ILM. We had it in FIM 2010, but now we can also leverage MFA, right? The Azure MFA specifically. All right, so what's new? Sync Engine's pretty much unchanged, right? That hasn't been changed in a long time, and probably won't be until they start combining some of the Azure technologies with it. Again, upgrade from FIM has the same field as installing hotfixes, some new technologies that are supported, right? So we get cross-browser support, finally. All right, we can now use browsers other than Internet Explorer to actually manage things in the MIM portal. Before, if you ran Firefox or Chrome or Safari, you could do some things, you could view some things in the portal, but when you started trying to actually manipulate resources, it would fail on you. Server 2016 is supported now with SP1. The SQL is huge here, right? In the past, with the FIM service databases, we were able to use load balancing and HA. We could put it on a cluster. But what we didn't have was the ability to support mirroring or the always-on availability groups, right? And with this 1459 fix, we can do that now. That was a sticking point in many places where we went to install MIM, and the SQL DBAs want to be on the latest and greatest. They can't do it. SCSM, if you're going to go that route for the reporting, we've got 2012, 2012 R2, and 2016. .NET 4 is required, and we can leverage the Azure MFA if we want to use multi-factor with our self-service password reset. All right, what are some things we're going to use MIM for? You know, some of it's going to be the same as what we used ILM for and FIM for, right? User provisioning. We're going to automate our users driven by our authoritative HR sources, or sometimes in some cases it's a payroll system, in some cases it's a ticketing system, and in the worst cases it's all three, right? Multiple authoritative sources. And you can enforce your standardization of account names and identity longevity, right? Your life cycle as far as when things are created, when they're removed, deprovisioning, right? Whether we're going to disable and move, helps you with your auditing, right? All this can be documented, configured, and then you can even run some reports. Hugh's going to talk a little later about some other reporting options, you know, out of the box with FIM 2010 R2 and MIM. We have some reporting capabilities as well, and we'll talk about those here in a minute. Another huge help when we got the portal was group management. With group management, we can do, of course, the self-service. We can let users create their own groups, and we can do things like approvals, and we can expire groups, right? Let users create their own project distribution groups that are going to expire after 90 days. And at 90 days or at 80 days, we remind them, hey, this group's going to expire. If you need it longer, come to the portal and extend it, right? Or we could even give them a automatic extension, right? There's all kinds of things we can do up there. But it gives the management of those distribution groups to the end users rather than them having to go through the help desk, and it gives you the ability to then clean up your Active Directory when those groups are no longer needed or managed. Unlike today, where if you don't have this, the groups will get created and someone might ask once or twice, but eventually it'll get forgotten about, and then you'll get down the road and nobody wants to delete these groups because we don't know if anyone's using these groups. So of course, reduce of service tickets, approval driven, fixes the hybrid exchange group problems. We're not going to talk a lot about hybrid exchange here, but it gives us the ability to create groups that are not dynamic distribution groups, but look and act like them, right? They are criteria-based groups that you define within MIM itself that can then be synchronized up to Azure. And self-service password reset. And we've got a couple of different options there, right? With the on-prem, with the MIM, we've got questions and answers, we've got one-time pins, MFA if we want to do that. The biggest difference between the on-premise and the Azure-based self-service password reset, if you're doing password write back, is the desktop integration. Right? And I'll have a little screenshot a little later here of what that looks like. We'll talk about it a little bit more. But the one big thing that's missing right now on Azure self-service password reset is being able to connect into that credential provider on a workstation and change the local password, change the password on that machine, right, on that domain join machine. And again, reduction of service tickets, right? If the users can reset their own passwords, that cuts down on the number of tickets. And with MIM, we also have the ability now to unlock, right? User suddenly remembers what their password is. They don't want to change it again because it'll burn up one of the 12 they're using in the rotating list on their desk. And so they can just go in and unlock their account if they've locked themselves out, but suddenly remember what their password is. They can go through the challenges, unlock their account, and then log in. All right, so what does that look like to our users? With Azure, right, registration resets performed in the cloud and password is written back to Active Directory. And then we have multiple authentication gates. There again, we can unlock it, but it requires that we're using password write back, back to our on-prem Windows Active Directory. With the MIM self-service reset, it's done through a web portal, right, through an IIS site. We can also connect into the workstation credential provider to do password resets on the workstations themselves, so they don't have to go through the portal, and they can also log in, they can change their password without having to go find some sort of a kiosk or a shared machine. It also works, it changes the password on our local Windows Active Directory, and if we are synchronizing passwords up to Azure, it will also send the password there. And what does that look like? So for those who have used this before, it used to say forgot password here. Now with our latest one, it says problems logging in. It's trying to be the gentler, nicer version of it. And if they click on that and they have registered for self-service password reset with the on-prem with MIM, then they will be challenged with whatever they were configured for, whether that be question and answer, one-time PIN, MFA, whatever it might be. So leveraging the Azure MFA, right? So we have this phone gate now, and we used to be able to do, or we had the ability before to do one-time PINs with SMS, but we had to have an SMS provider, and we had to have a little bit of custom code to do it. I think Twilio was the one I used most often, was the one that was implemented. But now we have this phone gate that will actually connect us into Azure if we wanted to. And we can use that to either make a phone call or send a one-time code. For the MFA piece of it, there's a little bit of work that needs to be done. You have to go in, much like you would have with the SMS provider before, and add in an encryption key and some configuration file settings. And then all of the MFA requests actually channel through a single user. So if you have MFA in the cloud, you don't have to set up a user for every one of your users to use MFA. You end up setting up a service account, for lack of a better term, that all of the SMS requests go through. Another improvement or addition to the latest hotfix is justifications for our approvals. Right? Many times in the past, we've had to write some sort of custom code for this, and if you want to join a group, all you can do is try and join the group. You can't tell the person, the approver, why you want to join the group. Now with this new XPath capability here, right, we can add in our request for justification. And so when they try to join the group, we can have them give a justification. And it works the other way too. If you rejected a request in the past, there was no way for you to tell them why. Maybe it was the wrong time, wrong place. You could tell them where they were supposed to be going, but there's no way for you to communicate that short of sending a separate email. Well, now when you reject a approval, it gives you the ability to type in a reason. You can tell them you don't like them, and that's why it's going in. We also have the ability now for custom group objects, right? The group controls were previously locked down to only group resource types. Now we can add those controls to other resources. We can build our own custom resources. You still have to have some of the required attributes: explicit member, computer member, and membership locked. And you can add the justification, right? The justification we were just talking about on the approvals, we can still leverage those on our custom groups, on our custom group resource. Let's talk about reporting a little bit. One of the nice features we got from in 2010 R2 was the ability to run reports on data that traversed through the FIM service, and we still have that. We also have the ability to do some reporting in Azure, so let's take a look at a couple of those. All right, so if you have an Azure AD tenant, you can download a reporting plugin that will grab certain events out of the Windows event log on your MIM service server and report those up to Azure, and you can then run reports on them. When you log into Azure, you can go to you'll find the Identity Manager reporting, and you download the installer right here. And you're going to need this cert file as well. It's pretty limited right now, though, right? All we can get on the MIM hybrid reporting is SSPR information, which if we have Azure, very likely we're using that for SSPR anyway, unless we really need that on-prem capability. And then self-service group management. We can see what group or what membership has been adjusted, right? We can run reports on that. If we want the other reports, the other information that we have either grown accustomed to from FIM 2010 R2 or have just heard about, that still requires the SCSM capabilities, right? You still have to install the reporting servers and the data warehouse SQL servers, and then you can write reports on any data, but it has to be data that flows through the service, right? It's not any of the data that happens in the sync engine unless we also flow that up to the service. And so we're still a little limited there, and that's something else Hugh's going to talk about here in a little bit. All right, so one of our other points on that first slide was, you know, what does this have to do with Azure? Right? Do we still need on-prem? And yes, we do. We talked about we need a solid on-premise Active Directory because we're going to synchronize that up to Azure. And so on our left here, we've got our typical installation, right? We've got our HR source, our MIM sync, our MIM service portal, our apps, other apps, our Active Directory, and our users. And the way to get your data to Azure right now is Azure AD Connect. Right? It reads, you scope it to what you want in your Active Directory, what objects, what OUs, and it synchronizes the data up to Azure Active Directory. Managing all of that's another topic. We're not going to cover a lot of that today, but that is how the data gets there. And once that data is up there, once those identities have been synchronized to Azure Active Directory, now your users can do things like that application, things out of the application gallery. We have a Azure AD app proxy, right? For if you have a Kerberos-enabled web application on-prem, you can use the Azure app proxy, and your users can access that from the cloud. The nice thing about this is that since it is being synchronized from your on-prem Active Directory, if you disable this user is disabled. And so you're removing access from anything that they're federated with up in Azure or the Azure App Proxy just by managing that identity on-prem. All right. So Hugh, that's the end of what I had for the webinar here. I was going to do a demo, however, my demo environment took a tumble again, and so I don't have a demo to show you. But it would have been a rather boring adventure anyway, just showing you how to click through screens. If it's something that is really needed, I'm sure we can set something up to give a demo to whoever would like to see one. However, I'm going to turn it back over to Hugh, and he can talk about some of the other things we have here at the end.
Okay, thanks very much, Jim, for an excellent run-through of that stuff. It occurred to us that if you're upgrading to MIM, you might want to think about extending it, not merely to include some of the additional features that Jim's already talked about, but there are a few other things I'd like to show you that have been exciting some of our customers, ranging from auditing, reporting, contractor management, and governance, risk and compliance. I'll give you a quick 5 minutes on maximum on this, and then let you go. And there'll be an exclusive offer at the end as well, so you might feel it's worth hanging on for. Can I have the next slide, please, Jim? So the first thing I want to talk to you about is a simple MIM audit trail. So what's this about? There's an increasing need to be able to prove what changes have gone on. The background here is that, of course, the MIM sync service sees a lot of things go through, provisioning, deprovisioning, enabling, disabling accounts, and key attributes that often affect the access that people get to various systems. So the requirement that has come up many times is very simple logging of key events. Just recording the date, where possible who did it, but just the key events as they go through the sync service. And a solution for that is the OCG Audit Connect for MIM. This is a very simple and unobtrusive client plus an MA plus a database. We're calling it a connector. It's not, of course, actually tracking what's going on in the target systems. It's just noting the changes that go through the sync engine. So if you would be interested in the Audit Connect for MIM, please say yes now. If you'd be interested in us doing a webinar, on that, and you'd like to know more, we just want to gauge here the amount of interest. I'm going to go through these pretty rapidly, so if you can give me a yes and a no pretty quickly, which you've all done, thanks very much. I'll close that. And if I could have the next slide, please, Jim. I'm going to not keep you any longer than I have to, so I'm going to talk quickly through these. So the next one is MIM monitoring and reporting. So if the audit trail idea is a very simple addition, this is a much grander addition. So a wider requirement for MIM reporting. Remembering that MIM reporting only deals with the portal, and not everybody has implemented the portal, not the sync service. Identity data, of course, goes through sync service, but it exists not just in the MIM sync service, but in all the target systems as well. Azure AD, SAP, Active Directory, HR, and other systems. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is MIM operation. The tools you have for understanding what's going on in MIM and how it's operating are quite primitive, really. And you don't always know that something's gone wrong. And when I say gone wrong, I'm not talking about MIM going wrong, I'm talking about data issues, that empty HR file that resulted in everybody being deleted from AD. You don't always know until the damage is done. So the requirement is comprehensive reporting, health checks, data checks, alerts and workflows, and why not detailed forensic tracking of all changes across these systems. So the solution that we've been implementing for this is Software IDM's Identity Panel. And this will give you point-in-time reporting of MIM data at any time, but not just MIM data, but everything else that's connected. So it will show you side by side what's going on in your HR system, Azure AD, all the other target systems that MIM's connected to, and so on. It has connectors, for example, to Azure AD, Office 365, ADFS, and so on. Very efficient in terms of processing and storage, and unobtrusive in use. Very comprehensive monitoring and management tool. So my next quick poll is, how would you like to see a webinar on that? I should have put that up a little earlier. Again, by the way, just so that you know, I'm getting a lot of yeses for both of these. Superb. Right, I'm going to close that. If I could have the next slide, Jim. And thank you very much. I think you pretty much, most of you have voted, so we'll move on. The next one is about temporary staff. So HR systems are not so well suited for managing contractors and other temporary staff. You can do this in the MIM portal, but again, not everybody deploys the portal. So the requirement here is simple contractor lifecycle management associated just with the sync engine, the joiners, leavers, renewals, and so on. And the solution here that we've come up with is OCG's contractor management system or connector. Very unobtrusive, just uses existing MIM infrastructure. Again, it's simply a database, a connector, a simple client with a web version in the pipeline. So I'm interested, sorry, I've lost my poll here. So I'm interested to know whether you'd like us to run a webinar on that as well. Slightly less interest there, more like 2/3, whereas the other was more like 80%. But anyway, thanks for voting. Going to keep this moving. Jim, if you could set up my next slide, and I will close that. You seem to finish voting. Thank you. Better governance. Okay, two big ones coming up then. We're talking a lot with our customers about this now. It's coming to the fore because of all the security issues and all the compliance issues that we're all very aware of. So the background here is that MIM can be used for simple group management, and that's great. MIM is very good at synchronizing objects like roles and permissions. You can do that with it if you want to. What it doesn't provide is a governance machine or engine. So the requirement here is for things like attestation, certification of user permissions and of roles and of group memberships and even licensing and things like that in the key target systems. Permission and role management, perhaps formal role-based access control, segregation of duties, that kind of thing across all the systems. Self-service of roles and permissions with an approval cycle. So I'm going to talk about a couple of solutions. First solution, ID driven. So this is cloud-based, it's on Azure AD, but it's very MIM friendly for role-based access control, attestation, and more. If you know of the Behold product, which is actually part of MIM, it fills that same niche, but we think it does it a lot better. And what's interesting about this, it's a SaaS model. It manages Azure groups as well, connects to Salesforce. We have an OCD connector that extends MIM to ID-driven, so decisions made in ID-driven are actioned by MIM. It also features zone-based access control. So I'd be interested to know if we should be running a webinar on that. And if you could give me my next slide, Jim. And voting's a little slower on this. Okay, fewer people voting, this is interesting. But those that are giving us a pretty big 80% yes. I'll close that now and keep the pace up. One more product to cover. So this one is same kind of requirement, but where we're talking about a much bigger product that's much wider in many ways and is more of a platform in its own right. So risk-based governance, what Savient like to term version 2.0. So if you're more interested in a risk-based approach to this, then you get the RBAC, the attestation, and much more. Sure, it can work with MIM, but you get risk analytics and process-driven rather than technology-driven solutions. Very security and compliance focused. For example, it has a lot of regulatory segregation of duties and so on built in. Fine-grained access management for the cloud and on-premises applications. So a single identity governance solution for applications, data, and infrastructure. Much bigger product. Now the problem is, you probably would find it difficult to distinguish from my two slides between these, and so probably if we do one, we ought to do the other. But I'm interested to know anyway who thinks we should be running a webinar on this. So two products that overlap, but actually when we get into details, they're very different indeed, and probably not as head-to-head and competitive as they look. Okay, that's great. Fewer voting on this, but a solid vote for yes, we should be running webinars. So if this short poll is anything to go by, we're going to have our work cut out with some more webinars. So I'm going to close this poll. You see, well, still a few votes coming in. Next slide, please, Jim, and I will close this now. Okay, that's 3/4 yes, so it's pretty consistent. Okay, an exclusive offer to all attendees. If you are upgrading to MIM, you may want to sharpen up your MIM capabilities, or you may have some new staff that you want to get up to speed. You'll probably be aware that we run a very comprehensive set of MIM courses. Specifically, we offer our MIM Foundation Advanced courses online as self-paced courses, very popular way of doing these courses at the moment. And we're going to give you 10% off any bookings by the end of May. You can start the course at any time within a year of actually booking it, so you don't have to start straight away. It's just a question of committing to it. And there's a coupon code there, 10 MIM online, which we would like you to use when you check out. You can go to our website for this, or you can contact us at the addresses that we'll give you at the end. Finally, of course, can we help? If you're looking for a technical partner to help you with your upgrade, we're here to help. Mail us, we'll put up a couple of addresses in a moment, or call us, and you can get those numbers from the website, and we will in any case be emailing you with further details. Final slide, please, Jim. And I guess the final slide is the usual. Thanks very much indeed, everybody, for attending. Thank you for your time. There's Jim and my addresses. You can also use info@ if you want to, if that's quicker to remember. And that's it, really. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day. I'll be enjoying the rest of my evening over here in the UK. Thanks again to Jim and the team for putting this on, and we'll be in touch with more webinars coming up.